The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Tuesday, March 5th. It is 6 p.m. We're at the Charlton Middle School, and we will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our budget presentation session Thursday, February 7th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting on Wednesday, February 13th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, that's unanimous. And the approval of our minutes of the executive session of Wednesday, February 13th.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Approval of the warrants. We do have warrants this evening.
Mrs. O'Coin, there was another minute executive session, February 6th, we had postponed. I don't think we have approved them.
We didn't
They're in our
approve those?
packet, but
No.
they're the ones we
Okay.
postponed, so if you want to
Okay.
go back and do that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yep.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the executive session of February 6th.
So
So-
moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. And we do have a warrant this evening. Citizens Forum, do we have anyone this evening? Okay. Communication,
I have none.
and I have none. How about our members?
I have something.
Okay, Jane?
Sorry. I was approached by the director of the health department in Charlton because I guess Bay Path uses some type of a sensor in their bathrooms for vaping, to control for vaping. And the Charlton Health Department has asked if we would look into if we would be interested or willing to do some kind of the same type of alarm system. I guess if vaping occurs in the bathroom, it rings through straight to the main office so that it can be stopped and hopefully not be an act that is one more tool just
Yes.
to help.
And we'll look into that, okay, Dr. Nash?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I also have something.
Okay, Mary.
Okay. Recently, I've had the opportunity to go on some college visits with my daughter, and I came across something that was really interesting, and I thought that perhaps we could use it here in our district. I'm going to pass this out to you so you have a copy of it. Here you go, Sandy. One of the schools that we've been looking at is Georgia Tech, and we researched this online, and then we had the opportunity during February vacation to go down and actually see this in person. And it's called the Robotarium. And it's very, very cool. It's about a $2.5 million facility where they have an arena with robots in it. And if you write code and you upload it to Georgia Tech, you can run virtually your code and use their robots and watch it run on their arena on the computer. And middle schoolers can do it, high schoolers can do it, anybody can do it, as long as it's not something that would be harmful to the system. They have somebody there 24/7 that monitors that, and you can test and research to your little heart's content and see how things work. And the best part of all of that is you get to use this $2.5 million facility for free.
And that sounds good.
So
It sounds like a lot of fun.
I have an extra copy for you, Karen.
Very good. Thank you.
I can see that's quite a facility.
Anyone else?
Thank you,
Okay.
Mary.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Nash.
I do not have one this evening, considering the
Okay.
fact that we have two very important topics
All right.
for discussion.
Thank you. And student rep report, Kaylee, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good. So this upcoming month, there's a lot of activities that Shepherd Hill will be hosting up at the high school. There's going to be a learning showcase up at Shepherd Hill to view student work and meet the teachers. And the guidance department will be holding various events up at the Hill that night, including 8th grade course selections, a college fair, and a career night, all in that half day. That will be on March 28th. And then at Dudley Middle School on April 22nd, Screenagers is going to be presented, and it's going to showcase how today's society affects growing up in the digital age. And then this Friday, March 8th, Shepherd Hill Dodgeball Tournament will be held, hosted by the Student Council up there. Highly recommend you attend if you've never been before. It's a great experience to go and watch. And then in the art department, Shepherd Hill students Jesslyn Croto and Olivia Wilson won honorable mentions for the Scholastic Art Writing Awards. And Jesslyn, she also won the grand prize for her piece in Youth Art Month this past week. And then also, which very exciting thing to announce, all winter sports teams qualified for an MIAA academic award, with only 3 teams getting a silver medal, and the rest of the teams got a gold medal. So that averaged a 3.16 GPA for the whole entire athletic department this past term. And then cheerleading, they won the Central Mass Regional Championship that was hosted at Shepherd Hill this past weekend. They're going to be moving on to regionals this month. And in show choir, our district had a huge sweep at the Connecticut Classic at Daniel Hand. Charlton Middle School Show Choir and Dudley Middle School Show Choir both received a silver award, while Charlton Middle School placed first and Dudley second. And then in the unisex division, the T-Tones, the all-male group up at Shepherd Hill, won third place, and Aleutian placed first in that division, while Fantasy won first place at the Connecticut Classic and received a gold medal. And that is what I have up at Shepherd Hill. Any questions, anything else?
Could you repeat the date on the screenagers?
April 22nd at Dudley Middle School.
In what time?
I think it's from 6 to 7.
Okay, thank you.
I heard it's supposed to be very interesting. Yes,
When you first said it, you said April 27th.
22nd.
22nd, okay.
Sorry.
No,
In the
that's fine.
DMS?
Dudley Middle School.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to new business, Director of Finance and Operations report, and that's Mr. Matthew.
I have no report this evening
Okay.
in light of our agenda.
Thank you. Budget and Finance Subcommittee report, Elaine. Do you have anything this
I
evening?
do. We met on February 25th, and one of the main areas of conversation was regarding the update on the capital plan study. And going back for further conversation with one of the vendors that had presented and starting to talk a bit about numbers. We were looking at just doing a facilities assessment of the 7 buildings, and then we were looking at doing a comprehensive study of the 7 buildings that was facility and educational use. The comprehensive study actually is coming in at a number that is affordable, and would be able to be done with what we have remaining from the E-rate reimbursement from the wiring project. So the Budget and Finance Subcommittee wanted to make a recommendation to the full committee to explore further doing a comprehensive study, which would be inviting people in to discuss what this is in the format with the full school committee. That was the main topic of conversation, and then our remaining topics were really related to the ongoing budget conversations and the conversation about the health insurance joint purchase group. But at this time, just on the behalf of the Budget and Finance Committee, I'd like to make a recommendation on their behalf that we investigate doing a comprehensive capital planning study.
I could just go into it further. That's, originally we had started, I just think we were doing roofs and things like this, but the one that Mrs. Rabbit's talking about would also check the educational flow and everything. It's more than just the facilities, it's what's inside the facilities. Wouldn't you say that's a good sum, yeah? So it's more than just what we originally thought. We thought we were starting with roofs. Now we want to do, I would like your recommendation for that.
So thank you for prompting me to remind you. So one of the things that the comprehensive study would do would actually be able to look at the use of buildings over time, and as how the spaces are used. It would be also looking at demographics, looking into the future and predicting trends as far as space issues are concerned, and would be able to give us a very thorough look at where we would be going in the future 5, 10, 15 years down the road regarding our buildings. Not just what we need to fix mechanically, but what and how we use the buildings.
Any questions for Elaine?
Okay.
Thank you.
So do you want me to make a motion, or how do we want to move forward from here? I'll leave that.
Do you want to?
I'll make a motion
okay.
that we invite in one of the vendors to give us to provide a discussion for us on what a comprehensive study would be, because it would be something that Mr. Matthew would need to go out to. He would create a request, is it RFQ?
Yeah.
Request for qualifications based on the expenditure. So we would need to vote as a full school committee to move forward.
Okay. And do I have a second to
Second.
Elaine's? More discussion. Anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, Elaine, motion carries, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, now we have the vote on the preliminary FY 2020 budget. And Dr. Nash,
Thank
you
you.
want to start?
Yes, I'm going to move over on this side. Do you want to stay there, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to.
Thank you, and good evening. Let me begin by saying that this presentation, as you know, was designed to be presented at your last school committee meeting, which was canceled because of the bad weather. So this initially was planned to be presented on February 27th, just for our audience, to ensure them that we are within our 75-day window. I wanted to begin first by saying that there's nothing new in this budget. This is really a single document that puts together all of the discussion that we have had in our prior budget meetings, the two that we had where the principals presented to you, and also the separate meeting that we had February 13th where you asked questions. So you're not seeing anything here that's new. The audience certainly is seeing, those who are here, and the audience watching at home are seeing things that are new. But I wanted to begin by talking really about, when we talk about educational planning, we talk about a budget. The budget is the single most important instrument, the vehicle to move instruction in any school district. And I wanted to remind the committee members, particularly also those in the audience, that this district developed a strategic plan a few years back and then revised it. It's a strategic plan that will take you through 2020. And as part of that strategic plan, it included 7 key competencies of a graduate. Some of these and many of these are being addressed and have been addressed as we will see in our discussions around the budget. Some of these certainly continue to need to be discussed and have some price tag that are attached to it. But I would just want to go through these and quickly point out some of the inroads that have been made. Around technological literacy, so certainly the focus last year in adding the 2.0 technology integration specialists have helped to move this. However, we really need to bring together a K-12 team, something that our STEAM director is going to work toward, to look at how we deliver technology in the district K-12 as far as instructional technology, what that looks like, who delivers it, what we deliver. And that's a piece that needs to happen in addition to recognizing that down the road there may be some additional staffing needs both in personnel and also certainly, as you have heard from the Director of Technology, in resources, in equipment. We have, this district has begun a strong focus and continues a strong focus on critical thinking and problem solving. Certainly PBL, project-based learning, is a key way that we can engage students in authentic, real-time tasks that put them in the lead as problem solvers. And this is a district-wide initiative, and so I think that speaks to this, as well as obviously what goes on in classrooms on a daily basis. Empathy and resiliency, two other qualities that we look for in a graduate. Choose to be nice, responsive classroom, all kinds of informal and formal things that we do throughout the district speak to this. I think teachers are particularly conscientious about creating environments that are safe, that are supportive, that encourage students to ensure that they are kind, respectful to everyone, whether they're in the classroom or whether their role is, outside of the classroom. So I think you see this happening both in formal, structured ways and also in informal ways. Again, the initiative and self-direction is something that every classroom teacher works to encourage. Project-based learning certainly is part of this. Being self-directed, being a self-directed learner is one of the key elements of project-based learning. Communication and collaboration. We have high school certificate programs that actually encourage this as part of their certificate. The communication program at the high school. We also certainly see this in many ways. Students engaging in, again, project-based learning, students engaging in classroom environments where they are working in groups in a collaborative environment. And the last area around a graduate is to be a globally aware citizen. And again, this has been a chief focus, certainly as part of the strategic plan, but also as part of the certificate program called GAP at the high school. So I just wanted to remind people that these have not gone away. They continue to be a focus. They are a focus through the 2020 for the new superintendent who comes in. There is direction and directive, if you will. Some of those competencies and some of those areas we have been able to address in some staffing, but not all, as you are well aware. What were our key budget priorities as we developed the FY20 budget? Certainly, number one under curriculum and instruction is to try to maintain adequate class size to support effective teaching and learning. I think that this budget does that. You also have information in the back of the budget that I will be going over in this presentation that indicates that our enrollment numbers have decreased overall and have provided for us some areas where class sizes are certainly where we would like them to be. So to some degree, that has lessened that burden of us ensuring that class size was certainly manageable and class size was where we would like it to be for students. Provide adequate funding to implement district initiatives and programs such as project-based learning, response to intervention, social-emotional learning. We were able to add 2.0 school adjustment counselors at the elementary level as part of the FY19 budget, along with the technology integration specialist. We certainly have earmarked through some of the reorg and some of the work that we'll be doing around co-teaching next year, making sure that we have the funding for that, as you noted when you were presented the professional development budget for next year. And then key to us is to implement a program delivery model for students with disabilities that provides equity in curriculum and high quality instruction with certified personnel. And that's a chief goal. Through the co-teaching model, where we'll have 2 certified teachers, one the content specialist and the other the SPED teacher, to deliver that instruction, one who understands and has certification in content, the other who is the master, if you will, in instructional strategies for students. So those are key pieces. They're not the only pieces of our budget priorities, but they're key pieces around curriculum and instruction. Around operations and management, we have some things that we felt were important for us to focus on. Certainly, we need to meet contractual obligations. As you know, we are in the midst of negotiations with DCTA. So our goal is to ensure that we come out of those whole, if you will, and that we're able to sustain any recommendations as a result of those negotiations financially. Also, to manage our health insurance obligations, we will have meetings starting tomorrow with staff throughout the district to share with them some of the concepts around the potential of moving to a group joint health insurance model, see how that ends up, see how that's received, and then over the course of the next few weeks, and then coming back to the committee if the Insurance Advisory Committee makes a recommendation that we move to that. You have heard us talk in general terms about the potential savings that could be as a result of that. We've worked to try to ensure that we certainly maintain number one priority around operations is safety and security of students and staff. A couple of things to point out. Your budget does include a school nurse at the high school. We consider that to be really a safety/health issue, and we're pleased that we're able to fund that. But we also will see, I'm sure, as the capital plan moves forward, and if the committee determines that they'll move through with a capital plan, facilities plan, as well as the educational component of that, you will see, I'm sure, some recommendations around, potentially around improvement for safety and security coming out of that. Also, implementing practices that provide, particularly in central office, improved efficiencies in operations and certainly economy of scale. You've heard us talk about new software for general ledger. You've heard us talk about the Maz study that will be coming to you about, with some recommendations around central office, potentially reorganization, around facilities, and also around the business office, and I'm missing one area. So I'll think of it as we move on. The other piece of this certainly is around how do we deliver what we do in a more efficient manner. And we've talked a little bit to you about the potential of moving to Frontline as a absence management system for staff, for professional staff. That's something that we have indicated to you can be covered in the current budget based on just realignment of resources. So those are some of the ways, and there are many others certainly that will come forward. I wanted to touch on, although I wasn't here, the impact of the override. I want to touch upon it for two reasons. What did it do and what did it not do? And I wanted to make clear, particularly to our audience, that the impact of this override is really primarily being felt in 2 years. The FY19 budget, the current budget that we have, which has allowed us to maintain a certain level of services, not necessarily to add a lot of new staff, but to maintain services. The exception being the positions that I mentioned earlier, the 2 technology integration specialists and the 2 school adjustment counselors. Those were the new positions, the 4.0 new positions that were added as part of that. Our challenge is to sustain that. The second piece of the $3 million that was received was to also move forward so that in FY20 we would be able to sustain the current budget as well as those new positions that were put in. And the third piece of that $3 million was for the district to start to spend approximately $1 million for infrastructure upgrades and technology. And as you know, we have completed 6 schools. We will continue to work at the high school, and by the end of the summer, hopefully the high school will have a much better infrastructure than it currently has with respect to technology. However, and I say this clearly, slowly, the $3 million was never meant to be a permanent solution to the budget issues that plague this district and plague many districts. That is, that for this district or most districts to maintain a level service budget yearly, most districts will need somewhere between 3 to 4% increase. On a $50 million budget, that would mean $1.5 million yearly to maintain what you have. We are not seeing that. You have not seen that. I looked back over the history of increases, and while there were some years that these increases were, I'm not going to use the word spectacular, but they were extraordinary. They were 6%, 5.5%, 4.5%. So at the very least, you could maintain, and you could add. They have not, that has not happened in the past few years. And in fact, given the funding mechanism in the state of Massachusetts, as with many states, where towns need to support you via their budgets, if you will, and a good year, this district may get somewhere around 600 to 700,000, maybe 5 to 700 would be the range. So you can understand, and the audience can understand, that if any year we need $1.5 million, or somewhere between $1.2 million and $1.5 million to maintain, then we're about $600,000 short. And if, as you remember in the slide we presented, if 80% of your budget is salary, then the only place you can go is positions. And that's the real challenge that this district will face next year, because the $3 million override really sustained you for 2 years. It kept us from falling off, as I think Mr. Matthew calls it, falling off the cliff or whatever. It is not and was not ever meant to be a permanent solution to the challenge that we have and that most towns have of trying to sustain what they currently have. So I would point that out. There will be, and continue to be after this year, an annual budget gap, and that budget gap will mean that this committee will have to seriously look at what their steps are going to be, whether or not they will go back and reduce, or whether or not they will go back to towns. But the override was not a permanent solution. I'll ask Mr. Matthew to talk about the next slide.
Thank you very much. I think that conversation, Dr. Nash, is a very good entree to some of the numbers that we're going to see here. In looking at state aid, the increases that the district is looking at from fiscal 19 to fiscal 20, $73,380 in Chapter 70, $38,307 in regional transportation. Total state aid is slated to increase by $111,687. That's a good revenue increase, but far short of that $1.5 million necessary to have that 3% annual growth that Dr. Nash correctly pointed out a district needs to maintain level service and have some opportunity for growth. Without the state providing this aid, unfortunately, our need has to go back to the taxpayers of the communities. In looking at some of the other funding sources that are used to offset the budget, the district for FY20 is committing $1 million in excess and deficiency funds of the $1.4 million certified. We're using every penny of the school choice revenues as available on the cherry sheets from the governor's office, $890,000. That expense is built into our budget. Transportation revolving, these are excess revenue funds from the transportation accounts that can be used in subsequent years to help lower our budget. This year we're able to use $110,684. Capital reserves and donations, this is primarily from the field project, where the donations were committed and the premiums from the bonds reserved of $69,533,000, and the inclusion of Medicaid for $200,000 in revenue for FY20. Those are all district-specific revenues. The other offsets that we use for our budget come from fees and grants and federal reimbursements. So our athletic fees help to support our budget to the tune of about $105,000 a year. Our preschool tuitions next year are slated to support us at about $67,500. The total federal and state grants that we hope to receive for next year total $1.38 million. Our E-rate reimbursement, which is basically the government saying that for schools, we should not be paying as much as the private sector, if you will, for technology. Specifically, this is our internet service. We get a reduction of $133,833 that comes right off the top of the bill and reduced in our budget. And our cafeteria revolving account, contributes about $1.1 million to our overall operation, including cost of food.
I would just point out, as we've pointed out to the school committee, I think, a number of times, if you go back, can you go back to that first slide? The heavy reliance that this district has placed on E&D to balance its budget, as well as the almost $900,000 in school choice monies. Any one of those things that change significantly to the negative means that we're looking somewhere to balance that. The $890,000 represents about 180 open positions. In other words, 180 slots. If we don't fill 180, then that number goes down, and we need to then figure out where do we get that money to support the budget. So this is the challenge for this district. We roll over every year money from the end of the year to our E&D, and the importance for us is if we don't, then we have a challenge to try to figure out where do we get those resources from. There's no other place. So one of the things that I think is significant is that if over the period of time you've increased school choice, in many districts school choice is really a contingency. It's not used to balance a budget. It's the place that districts use for contingency. So when an extraordinary project comes up that they need, they don't have to go back to towns, or if they want to do some one-time purchase, for example, a reading series, a math series, they can look at that to do that. We can't do that. We need those funds to simply balance our budget. So I would point that out. The committee is well aware of it. They've heard me talk about it ad nauseum, but I'd like those people who are listening at home to understand that this district has done everything it can to manage its budget in an appropriate, fiscally prudent manner.
I believe my doctor refers to the E&D as ulcer number 1 and school choice as ulcer number 2, if we're keeping track.
I was going to say that you hold your breath and have what they call agita between now and the end of the school year. I'm hopeful that we have a healthy balance to pass on.
That's the goal. Just a quick summary page of the budget. As you can see, the operating budget has gone up. The capital budget indeed has gone down dramatically, so our total budget has indeed gone down, as have our total assessments to the towns. But because all of that money was really monies from the school projects, the middle school construction projects, and the improvements at the other schools, that was all debt exclusion money. So it's not new revenue for either town. It's just simply money that the taxpayers won't have to pay in the upcoming year, which is a good thing in and of itself, but not a savings, unfortunately, for anybody. A breakdown of where the expenses go for FY20, as you can see, salary and fringe benefits account for the 79% that Dr. Nash has been referencing. Our next set of areas are split somewhat evenly. Busing at 6%, sped and state assessments at 5%, maintenance of buildings and utilities 4%, tech supplies and textbooks 5%, and the little sliver of debt that we have remaining on our books for the field. Dr. Nash, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the assumptions.
As the committee knows, when we initially gave out the budget books a while back, we talked about the fact that when you build a budget, you have to make some assumptions. And I presented a memo to you that said, here are the budget assumptions, and here are the things that are unknown. And I wanted to make sure that, that everyone hears this. Any changes in unknowns to the positive will mean certainly that there is more available funds for us to use, or to put positions in, or to make some decisions about. But some of these assumptions you've already seen as revenue offsets. So the E&D account, we have made the assumption that we will have at least $1 million to move forward next year to balance the budget. If for some reason that does not hold, then we will be coming back to you to say, we need to look at this budget and we're going to need to make some reductions somewhere. School choice revenue, again, we've made the commitment that all of that money, $890,000, we will take in, and we will use that to help offset the budget. Circuit breaker, as you know, it's an offset for SPED. We are hoping that this number holds. We believe it will. Usually we underestimate what that figure will be, but that number will help again to offset the cost in SPED. That's $800,000. Remember, we indicated to you that the current FY19 budget will have approximately, at this point in time, around $550,000 that we would hope to be able to end the year with all things willing, and move forward as our contingency and SPED for next year. So this is monies that would be coming in. Obviously, we've had to make assumptions for salary increases for all personnel. We have to put a placeholder in that. I've also indicated to you that in this budget is $39,000 that can be used based on the committee's desire and decision for the Mars reorganization recommendations that you'll be hearing at the last meeting in March, and/or as you hire a new superintendent for some additional funds if those are needed for salary purposes. We also have moved the STEAM director position out of school choice. Those of you who've been on the committee probably have a lot better memories than I do that this position had been funded out of school choice initially. Well, we've put that into the general ledger side, if you will, the general budget, and that no longer is being funded out of school choice. We also believe that while we have funds in unemployment, we've increased that. We're hopeful that we won't use that. Part of that increase certainly is due to the fact that we're reorganizing in our SPED instructional assistance, and should unemployment cost elevate a little bit. This is in addition to what we currently have, which is around, I think, $50,000 that we have. So we're hopeful that we won't use that. As we've indicated, there are some avenues that will be available for some of the individuals that may not have positions. So hopefully that will decrease, and we will not be using all of the $130,000+. We've also had to look at what we consider to be unknowns in our budget still. We don't know what the increases are going to be. We don't know what the increases that represent part of that 80% being salaries. We don't know, for example, what's going to happen with the group insurance plan, and whether or not that could result in a positive to the school district with respect to the change. Those are unknowns. We don't know what the actual unemployment costs will be. There could be some savings there. And we certainly don't know about the unknown with SPED. SPED is probably the most volatile area in our budget, and we certainly know what we know as of now. But I can tell you that sometimes on a weekly basis, we have questions and we have concerns, and therefore oftentimes services and programs for students change, and that means additional staffing. What we do know is that we have, and I would say Lorinda Allen, the SPED director, and the principals have worked very closely to ensure that what we know now about the students and their needs have been addressed. We have a spreadsheet that we have gone through a number of times to ascertain the exact number of instructional assistants that we need for programs, for students, and at grade levels. And I'm sure we'll revisit it again, but just looking at all of that to ensure that we have met the IEPs as we know them, and that we have been able to predict those unknowns that potentially may become knowns in the next few months. But after that time, between April and June, things may shift, but you also know that should some of those costs increase, those would not be borne initially by the district after April. We also don't know if there would be any potential impact to any kind of retirement incentive that may be offered to any of our groups. So I'd like to talk a little bit about SPED. Mrs. Allen is not here this evening. When this meeting got changed, she had already planned a trip, and she will be back tomorrow. So she just wants to ensure that the committee, you received a very detailed overview of SPED, but I wanted to, for the audience purposes and for those who are watching on TV, those who will watch, I wanted to give you just some background on SPED. We have 640 students currently who are receiving services in some manner, shape, or form. We run within the district some substantially separate programs. Currently, there are 8. You heard us talk about the fact that we might need to add a program at the high school. We determined that based on where our age of our students was at this current time, that we could not add the program, but add a job coach, instructional assistant job coach. And that's what we intend to do, but in the future, certainly, these programs are going to change. We've had some discussion with some of the principals about adding substantially separate programs at DES, also looking at adding them at our middle school where we don't have them. That has not happened. These are the current programs as they exist. We have approximately 33 students who are in out-of-district programs. The next slide shows you our staffing for instructional assistants. I've broken it out by schools. We have a total of 72.1 instructional assistants. Our instructional assistants for SPED fall into 3 categories. They are either grade wedded, if you will. In other words, they are not wedded to a student or a program, but they are assigned to a grade and they work within that grade. They are program IAs, SPED IAs, who are assigned to any of our substantially separate programs in our buildings, and/or they are assigned to a student as a result of an IEP. So they could be 1-on-1s, 2-on-1s, in some instances 3-on-1s. The total cost, excluding the benefits, for our 72.1 instructional assistants, this does not include the health benefits, this does not include vacation, is $2,331,023 currently. I wanted to also break out for you the major expense categories in SPED. These are net of the offsets that we use. And I wanted to show you the comparison between FY19 and what we project at this point in time for FY20. There's been a slight shift in tuitions, down $166,000+. Partly that's because either students have aged out of programs, or as we begin to look at creating more programs in-house, we would hope that we could bring some students back, but a lot of this is because either a student has aged out of the program. Transportation is a contract that you currently have with Vanpool. The transportation costs are set, they're negotiated. Those transportation costs we anticipate will go down around $42,000, but again, I caution you with these costs that while we're talking about it right now, this is a snapshot at this place and this time. Any of these, particularly tuitions and transportation, which go hand in hand, can change. Contracted services, we believe, will go down. Part of that is due to the fact that we're creating, that shift comes in that we're hiring a BCBA in-house, so some of those contracted services that we were outsourcing for now come in and are reflected in another way in the budget. So while you may see this and think it's a savings, it may not be a total savings of that amount, which is around $47,000 and some change. Next page, please. Our anticipated revenues, you've seen this before. Circuit breaker, which we, again, anticipated $800,000 in using. And then our IDEA, which is the federal grant entitlement grant. anticipated that to be a few thousand less. Those pay for positions, and certainly, as we write that grant, as you know, it's a non-competitive grant. We always hold our breath, hoping that it doesn't decrease by 10%, that the increase is maybe 2 to 3%, so that we can assure that we have the staffing that we need and the resources. I've also given you just a glance at the professional staff at all of the schools. When I talk about professional staff, remember, in addition to our classroom teachers, and in addition to our SPED teachers, we have a number of other professional staff that make up our school. So it's important to know that some of these staff are paid for by grants. Reading in Title I could be partially paid for by grants. ELL, our ELL, English Language Learner teacher, as you know, we have recommended and you have agreed to add another position so that we can meet really the mandates as far as time. Our occupational therapists, our speech and language teachers, our school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, psychologists, nurses, those are all part of our professional staff. I did not, because I really ran out of space, and I would have had to add a number more slides to show you all the support staff. Certainly, we've talked about the support staff with respect to instructional assistants. The only other place, as you well know, that you have instructional assistants are in kindergarten. So all of the, when I mentioned the 72.1 instructional assistants, those are all special ed instructional assistants, but you also have general instructional assistants in kindergarten, all your kindergarten classes. So I will just walk you through this, or you can look at this and see that certainly there is a range. Our numbers in each of the schools we'll talk about as far as the enrollment numbers. You'll see that in some areas in the schools that we are decreasing. But the caution is that when we start talking about decreasing numbers, while that may impact a class and a class size, it doesn't directly impact the fact that you still need the services from other professional staff. So while you might be able to adjust in the future the number of sections that you have, chances are that that position may have to move somewhere else in another professional staff capacity. So what you have now on this slide is the enrollment, and I wanted to show you the comparative enrollment from October 1st, and whether or not we have a decrease. So this is in general, we're talking about the combined enrollments for all of your elementary schools. And if you were to look at the comparison between 2017-18 and 2018-19, you will see that in pre-K, K and 1, we have 630 students. That represents a loss of 6 students. One thing, as we know about kindergarten, that's volatile to begin with because, well, students, some students will attend kindergarten. Some parents will decide that they don't want their children to. They'll attend private. So for all kinds of reasons, oftentimes that number fluctuates from year to year, and until they get into grade 1, oftentimes the real numbers aren't established. In grades 2 through 4, we've seen a decrease when we compare from last year to this year of 54 students. We have a grand total of 820 students in our combined, as of October 1st, in our combined 2 schools that are housed grades 2 through 4. That decrease obviously represents, we wish it, in some ways, it doesn't represent itself as being a particular grade, but you'll see that the numbers are really throughout grades 2, 3, and 4, with the biggest numbers being 21 at grade 3. But they're pretty consistent, 15, 21, and 18. This is something that, as part of your capital facilities plan, when you look at educational needs, you also look at long range. You don't want to invest dollars in the building if you know that down the road, that building may not stay a building in use, or you may decide to use part of that building. So when we talk about doing educational planning, part of that is really doing a very thorough demographic study, potentially, for this district that will project out some numbers for you, so that as you move forward, you can better plan for what the needs might be, both in facilities and both in instruction. On the next page, which is middle and high school comparison, looking at grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 combined, 1,235 students, and that represents a decrease of 38 students. At the high school, 1,115 students, a decrease of 36. Again, part of my presenting this is that I think for the audience, this is something to look at to see whether or not this trend becomes a trend over the next few years. You'll see that overall, in 2017-18, we had 3,934 students in our October 1st enrollment. As we know, that number is significant because that's the number that's used to base monies that we get. And we are now, in October, we were at 3,800. So, again, I would caution you, while people will say, wow, we lost 134 students, why aren't we cutting staff? We still run programs. It looks very different at high school and middle school when you're running programs specific to content areas. And when you look at the average class size in a bit, when we show you the slides on that, you'll see that we're probably where you want to be with average class size, with some exceptions. So, projected class size, here we are. Next slide. Here we go. So these are projections, and again, the committee has seen these numbers before. Nothing has changed. We're looking at some comparative numbers for you, just so that side by side you can see the counterpart school. For example, kindergarten currently at Mason Road has 20. The reason that we have recommended the potential of moving a position over from Mason Road to CES is the fact that kindergarten CES is projected to have 23.5 students next year. So whether or not we can accomplish that is, again, it's a wait and see. Grade 1, again, comparison numbers. 22 at Mason Road, we project 20.2 at CES. Grade 2, DES, 21. At Heritage, 20. At grade 3, 21.4, 22. Grade 4, 22 and 23. Grade 5, 21.4 and 20.7. So again, similar, even though, remember, the schools and their enrollments are not similar. In some instances, the swing could be 40 or 50 student difference in a school. Sometimes it could be as much as a little under 100. Grade 6, average class size, 21.4, DMS at Charlton Middle School, 20.7. And same thing holds true in grades 7 and 8. And then when we move to the high school, obviously, the range, because we offer specific courses, looks very different. Anywhere from 14, which typically can come in, an AP program or a course that you run, to 23.5. This probably does not include what I call sometimes your outlier classes that are your PE, music, and that oftentimes can be as high as 30 plus. So again, these are good class sizes. It is not, if you look around and talk with many districts, you'll see that these class sizes are class sizes that many school districts would envy, because at middle schools and at elementary schools, particularly, you'll oftentimes see class sizes somewhere between 25 to 27 at middle schools. And believe it or not, you will see class sizes somewhere between 23 to 25 at elementary schools. So we've been fortunate that we were able to maintain this. I would, again, caution that down the road, in 2 or 3 years, this may not be the case. And you may, again, when you look at 80% of your budget is salaries, you will be looking at making some hard decisions, unfortunately, around class sizes, it would appear. So what did we aim to do in this budget? We certainly, as the committee know, needed to meet some compliance issues, and you'll see that in a minute. We needed to meet the requirements of special ed IEPs, individual educational plans, that are mandated. We needed to try to address any safety and/or health issues that were in our budget. These are all regarding personnel. We wanted to try to address, as a team, we wanted to try to address the strategic plan and some of the initiatives, one of which was to add back foreign language at the middle schools. As the committee knows, we're not successful in being able to do that, and that is troublesome to me and troublesome to certainly all of the members of our team. We wanted to see if we could address some of the scheduling and our supervisory issues. Again, while this tends to be more at the middle school right now, it's because over the past years there have been reductions in staff, and in doing that, that has presented challenges in scheduling and supervisory issues for both principals. And most importantly, how do we address, instructional needs? How do we address program needs? So those were kind of our goals. Some took priority simply because they were mandated by the state, if you will, or they were needs that we felt were safety issues. And so as you'll see on the next page, here's what we've been able to do with the FY20 budget. It says FY20 budget, somewhat redundant, budgeted, requested positions, misspelled. Oh my, Mrs. Cabal. And you got that. I apologize. Boy, oh boy, that's not good. We were able to address within the budget the 3 top positions that we consider to be health or safety issues. The ELL teacher that I mentioned earlier, the English language learner teacher, has been addressed because this district currently has 1 teacher, and we are not able to meet the minimum minute requirement for our students. I know today Mrs. Matarosian sat through a webinar that suggests that there are going to be more mandates, if you will, around ELL. And if those come to fruition, we are certainly going to need that teacher, but we may need to look at some of our stipend positions in addition. We were able to also, out of our budget, include the 2.0 SPED instructional assistants that are part of IEPs that will require it. There are a total of 3.0 positions. One is the high school job coach. The other are the 2 instructional assistants that are mentioned under compliance. And then an issue that is, you heard Mr. Chaplin bring forward to you, I think very eloquently, in providing you with some DART information, comparative data, showing the size of our high school and all of those high schools that are in our comparative group, and the fact that we have 1 nurse for 1,100 plus students. So we are able to address that. That really is a health issue, it's a safety issue, and given the fact that many public school districts work very hard to keep all students, particularly medically fragile students, in school, and given the fact that at any given year, any school could certainly have that need, when you look at 1,100 students in one building, just the day-to-day medical issues that they have and present to you is a challenge for one person to do. And I think Mr. Chaplin has said that he's gone through 3 nurses in 3 years. So that may speak to the need. So we were able to address these within the budget. Through the SPED reorg that the committee is aware of, we picked up about $125,000, and we will be able to fund the BCBA teacher. We currently only have 1 in the district. Part of the services that we need are contracted out to the tune of a little under $20,000. We will be able to use that money, and we will hire a BCBA that will work for our district, and so that additional cost to the district should be around $38,000. That will be covered from the SPED reorg. Then the job coach, we talked to you about this at the high school. We thought we would need a program specifically for 18 to 22-year-olds. We're able to do this and deliver the service with an SPED instructional job coach. And then finally, as all of you have heard, all of the principals are moving to co-teaching next year. We're starting it, but we're really implementing it where we need to initially, and that's at grades 9 and 10, because this is their last shot when they go through the high school. And in order to do that, we needed to add another SPED teacher. So we will be adding that. Those 3 positions are because we have reorganized internally some other positions and have a savings. That's not, we were not able to afford to do those in any other way, but also we believe that the model that Mrs. Allen presented to you as part of our 3-year plan makes sense. Next slide. What did we not budget? And I spelled positions correctly. I'm an English teacher, I'm very embarrassed. All of these positions were presented to you by the principals in their individual presentations in February, early in February. All of these, we believe, are essential. None of them are currently funded in the budget. So the kindergarten assistant position, which would come if we move the teacher from Mason Road, we're going to have to come up and figure out where do we get that money again to fund the assistant position. It is not in the budget as we speak, partly because we're not sure at this point in time that we're able to do that. We need to wait and see what the numbers are going to look like. Part of the strategic plan, as I pointed out earlier, was to add, in fact, it indicated that those positions would be added for FY20, if I recall. We are not able to do that. The 2.0 foreign language teachers, that one at each of our middle schools, again, not in the budget for next year. So unfortunately, we're not able to address that. The library instructional assistant that was requested by CMS, not in the budget. The high school guidance counselor, another position, that is not in the budget. We talked about issues around supervision, but also issues around scheduling. Part of the way that we could address that would be through either a health PE teacher, adding one of those at DMS. That is not in the budget. We also talked to you about the athletic director position. Currently, that position is a 0.6 teacher, 0.4 athletic director. Again, in the data information that was presented to you, that's the comparative data, there is not another district in that data that does not have a full-time athletic director. We do not. Our person is a 0.6 teacher first, who unfortunately, because of the duties of his position, misses somewhere around 40 days during the year. So that's a position that we still would like to look at and see if we could find some way to fund that, because it's a critical position, but we've not been able to put it in the budget as of this date and time.
Couldn't we find a way, though, for him not to teach and just do the athletic
Well,
work
that's what we were talking about. but I
instead
think-
of having that title, athletic director?
Well, 2 things.
Like
One,
what he's doing
one,
now.
if the person becomes a non-teacher, then they can't be a part of the teachers' union. So that was our number 1. They would have to be a building administrator / supervisor. They would have to hold a different license. So as soon as you take away that, you would have to change that. So.
And so is there a number of classes that they have to teach? Suppose he only taught one class,
You have
one
to-
help. Could he
you-
still be
I
under the
think
teaching?
you have to teach 20, I'm not sure. I believe you have to teach at least 1 class.
Oh.
If I can recall my days in Hanover, I had a 0.8 athletic director, 0.2 teacher. So, and I,
So maybe for now you
yeah.
could do that, so he'd have
Potentially.
more time and he wouldn't be missing
well, I
full
think
classes.
unfortunately, the meetings are still gonna be there. Bill will tell you, there are all those requirements to attend all of these meetings, and they come at different times, and even when you reschedule, and we have the type of schedule that's rotating and everything else, generally, it always seems they seem to miss their class. Or you have critical issue, particularly as spring comes along, and the fields aren't ready, and the season opens in April, and it's, softball and baseball. What you end up finding is you're probably rescheduling half of April and you need, it's just the time to get on the phone and do those things and change the buses and change the referees and everything else. It just takes time, and
But
that
it'd
doesn't
be better
include.
to miss just
Yeah.
one class than four, if he's teaching four.
The issue is with a rotating schedule, you can't do that. So,
No.
yeah, that's the problem you've got. Your schedule, if it were a constant schedule, and you assign them their class, always the first class in the morning, then they had the rest of the day, potentially, but we don't have that.
I think what you're implying is there'd be only 20 kids affected instead
Yes,
of more. It's
yes.
not so much the sequence.
Yes.
It's only
Right.
one
Yep.
group of students. not-
Students,
yeah,
not
it's-
Right.
80,
Right.
if there's 20 in each class.
The recommendation, certainly we could look at that, but I think the larger issue is, you really, our aim was to get
Right.
a position that also provided some additional support through supervising individuals in evaluation, PE and health, and also support staff through an administrative position, because this would be an administrative position at the high school to support the current administrative staff. And then the last position is a position that I think certainly we talk about health issues, but we talk about the need to ensure our buildings are clean. As I've said before, and I will say it again, I was fortunate today, I was hiring someone for our retirement of Michelle Billis, and he and I were talking, and he said, I remember, though I wasn't here, you said something when you did your tours of the buildings in August. And I said, really? But you weren't here. He said, that's right. He said, but you said that you were so impressed by the quality of these buildings, the way they looked in August, when typically your buildings are absolutely not where they would be in September or right at the beginning of your school year, whenever that is. And I said, I absolutely mean that. I would still tell you that, because I've never met a group of individuals who are as caring about kids, about the way their buildings look, who take their jobs to heart and just do everything you ask of them. And I have, worked, as you know, in a number of places, and I'm in awe of the fact that we have such a wonderful group of head custodians and custodians. The other day, on Friday afternoon, the two middle school principals and I were texting madly about trying to ensure that our middle school music students would be safe going to their competition. And along those lines, prior to the texts that were going back and forth between the three of us, Greg Duvall was in there trying to get buses for me, because I had indicated that I felt better if we could put them on motor coaches. And could you do some research for me very quickly? I need this in the next 20 minutes, because we're waiting to make a decision. And without, hesitation, he was out trying to talk with who he needed to talk to, go over to Becky to see whether we could, she knew of some coaches that we could get, or a company. So this is, whenever I need them, they're always there. They're just really strong people. And again, having worked in districts where that has not always been the case in this position that I currently am in, I can tell you I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And so I wanted just to say that publicly. I know we need another custodian. The high school is used all the time. We probably could use some more hours in some of the other buildings, that's for sure. But like anything else, we've had to make priorities. These are the positions that, as you know, we've presented to you, that we have been able, that we are reorganizing. I wanted to remind people of this. When I say that, that means that we're able to fund these through this reorganization. The SPED, at district level, the SPED team chair positions are going to move from 6 to 4. We hope to create a different job description. They are going to become administrative team coordinators. That savings will help to fund those 3 positions that we talked about in the prior slide. All of the schools are reallocating in moving to a co-teaching model. They are reallocating the general IAs, who are SPED IAs wedded to grades. We are not touching program IAs. We are not touching any IAs, SPED instructional assistants who are wedded to students. We are looking at a delivery model that means that instead of having a general instructional assistant move in to do something that they are not certified to do, to deliver instruction. We want a SPED teacher to bring equity to our students. And so that is the goal. We are not doing this across the board. We are not trading in all of our instructional assistants. We are doing this in a methodical way. We are starting out at the high school, but we are also continuing to move this down to the other schools. We already have places where this is happening, but we intend to continue this. This is about ensuring equity for students with disabilities by having 2 people, both certified. In kindergarten, again, the transfer position, which we talked about, the ACES position is a position that both our middle schools have. Mr. Packett is looking to move that position to computer teacher. That will provide certainly a better way for scheduling for him, as well as addressing the equity issues and ensuring that in more grades, students have this. I talked earlier about the need and the discussion that I've had with our STEAM director around what does technology instruction look like K-12, and what should it be? And that's something for the future that I think will be on my list as I transition out, but certainly in talking with whoever comes in around instruction. How do we better deliver this? What does it currently look like? What should it look like? Where do we have gaps? And then our library assistant positions that you heard me talk about, critical positions. The way that we're funding these, as you know, is that we're moving our lunch monitor positions into the cafeteria. You have a healthy cafeteria revolving account. We are able to fund the positions for the lunch monitors that we currently have at the elementary school, at least for next year, out of that account. That frees up almost all of the cost for the salaries for these instructional assistants. These are critical positions. I wish I could hire 4. We can't. So the principals will work out. But to have someone who now will be in the library at our elementary schools, I'm excited, and I can tell you they're excited. And we can thank our Director of Finance, because when I was sitting here, he and I, and he saw me having agita and saying, how can we do this? He said, we might be able to do it this way. And he didn't have to say anything else, because this is absolutely such important positions, and I know that you all believe that too. So I thank you for that support. And I am sure Mr. Greenberg, I'll thank him also as the Director of Food Services. So I end by a couple of things under questions. I make 2 statements. First, the FY20 budget, and this again is not for this committee because they're well aware of this, only adds new staff to address compliance and/or safety or health issues. Some of the positions, as you know, were added because we were able to reorganize and more efficiently use monies that we already have. And that will continue to be, I think, what has to happen in the future. The FY20 budget does not add new personnel to meet any goals that were identified in the strategic plan to continue to meet those goals, particularly around, as we said, foreign language. And it doesn't necessarily advance some of the initiatives that we've had, and that is the issue that we struggle with. As I said to you earlier, there are none of the positions that the principals and/or directors brought forward to me in the initial budget meetings were positions that I thought we did not need. The question was, how did we move forward to try to fund those? So on that note, I will end, and if there are questions that people have of myself or Mr. Matthew, we certainly can answer them, but we also need to talk to you about the memo and our next step, which is really how you as a committee would like to approach the budget and the recommendations. Rich, do you want to talk about those too?
Sure. Before you this evening, you have 2 different recommendations, again, depending on which way the committee wants to go. And really, the only difference in the 2 is the total assessment to the towns, and again, how you wish to structure that. Under scenario number 1, It's the budget as presented in the PowerPoint, but unfortunately, as we indicate, the new expenses exceed the new revenues to the tune of about $149,380. So one concept, one recommendation number one would pass that assessment on to the town, but, depending on school committee's desire, we could indicate that, as the budget information changes, that number may change. The second recommendation is, again, the same budget, but basically by making expenses match revenues. So what we've done in recommendation number two is to put the 2 special ed aides to circuit breaker, lowering or utilizing $52,000 more from there, and then increasing our use of circuit breaker, of excess and deficiency funds, increasing our use of E&D for the remaining $97,380. This would leave the total assessments exactly the same as last year. However, as I indicated, there was a shift from the minimum local contribution, where even under recommendation number 2, the assessment for Charlton would go up by $37,000, and the assessment for Dudley would go down by $37,000. Again, that is the total assessment for operations is the same as last year. The only shift there is because of the minimum local contribution.
Okay, any questions on that before we vote the final number? Rich, do you want to add anything else before we vote the final number?
Just that, it was nice to operate this year with known revenues. It's an interesting place to be, especially in this district. So it was nice to do that. I think, sitting at the table last year, certainly my understanding was we were going to try to avoid increasing assessments to the towns in the second year of the override, and we have a path forward to do that. That is workable.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to either go with the recommendation number 1, we all know, and we've studied that, what that is, or the recommendation number 2. So do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to go with recommendation number 2.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Yeah.
I'm just reiterating what I said at the last meeting. I think we did make that promise to the town that the assessments would stay the same, and by shifting the funding, we have not added positions or anything. It's the same budget, just different payment, so to speak, of $150,000, but it's still the same. It's not like we're cutting a position to assess the town more. So I think, I said it before, I think our word is worth $150,000 since we are still getting the same services. It's just reallocating $150,000, approximately $150,000.
And I want to keep our promise too, because that was one that they certainly remember. I've heard a lot of feedback on. They know exactly what their assessment is going to be. Anyone else?
Through the chair. I have a different opinion. I would have preferred to go with recommendation number 1. I think our job is to present this budget to the communities, and the communities, I don't think that is an absorbent amount of money that we're proposing to put forth to them. And I think that we are providing a service to the students in these communities and their families, and we have done, our group has done everything in their power to try to live within the number that we started with. And I personally believe that our job is to make sure that the school district can run to the best ability that it can, and continuing to take money out of a fund that we just heard could not be there, barring any kind of incident, it may not be the best way to move forward, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we take a vote?
Through the chair. I agree with Mrs. Terry that I think it is, the responsible action is to go with recommendation number 1. And I have a tremendous concern, and sitting in Budget and Finance with Mr. Matthew, we keep having this conversation regarding our excess and deficiency account. And following recommendation 2 leaves very little money in that account to handle any type of emergency that comes up. With the aging issues of our buildings, we encountered last spring an issue here at Shepherd Hill with the generator, which I believe was somewhere between $140,000 to $160,000. We know that we're not moving forward on any of the roof repairs, and we understand, especially with Charlton Middle School, the school that we're in, the issues that have been occurring that seem to be getting worse. I look at the budget process in this manner, which is we have an obligation to provide a number in advance for towns to plan for it. There is nothing that prevents us from moving between now and town meeting to change where the numbers are and to change the assessments. We could, through the process of the budget, as our numbers become more solid, the legislative process continues to move. There could be recommendations as the budget is being developed in the House right now that might give us an indication that there's possibility of some additional, especially with the per pupil, which right now is only budgeted at $20 per pupil, but typically moves $25 to $30 per pupil. There's legislation that's looking for $50 per pupil. That money can change, which would in itself reduce the assessments to the towns. We have a budget joint financial meeting with both towns on March 20th, which will be our first opportunity to sit down and discuss with the towns where we are at this point in time. I would like to look at proposing this to them. We haven't been in a situation right now where we've gotten any feedback from them on where they are and whether or not this is possible. Being involved through budget and finance over the process, and we spent a good 18 to 20 months working on the override process, I know that Mr. Desto was quite clear in the override process that we weren't guaranteeing that we weren't coming back for additional money. But this was to where we were with the best knowledge of what we were going to be able to do. I guess I struggle, and Dr. Nash, through presenting the budget tonight, has done a very good job of really indicating where we are, the realities of where we are, and the fact that we keep moving forward, doing the same things that we've been doing for years, which has put us in this situation. A heavy reliance on E&D, which for us right now, I am so concerned that we are going to have some major issue happen over the course of the FY20 year. If something major happens and we don't have the money for it, where are we going to get the money? Now you're in the process of you're in the school year, and now you have to address that expenditure. In the heavy reliance on school choice, I have difficulty going with recommendation 2 without having a conversation with the towns. And we are scheduled to have that conversation with the towns on March 20th. I think that we go with recommendation 1, and then in our conversations with the town and as the legislative process moves forward, we can always change and reallocate the assessments so that we can come back to recommendation number 2. But I think it's preemptive to make that assumption on what the towns can and cannot do to support us at this point in time. So it's my agreement with Mrs. Terry that we would be looking at recommendation number 1.
Any other discussion before I take a vote?
Can I ask a question? Is there typically a number that we like to see or have typically had in the E&D fund from year to year? I know we like to have as much as possible.
The maximum amount would be in the $2.5 million range. Right now, our number was certified at 1.4, so we're a little over the 50% mark to what's allowable. In an ideal world, we'd have $2 million sitting there that we don't touch.
That we don't use to balance.
That's an
our budget.
ideal world.
Yeah, isn't that 5% of your budget you should have in the?
Well, that's the maximum allowable.
Yeah, maximum allowed.
Lest we forget.
But
you know,
hardly anybody has that.
The point of E&D in a regional school district from years ago
Yeah.
was for extraordinary things that come up. And over the years, as challenges with all budgets in all towns happen, every year it seems that, school districts will take a little bit from E&D.
But to have this reliance of over $1 million every year, but more importantly, to hold your breath, to make sure that by the end of this fiscal year, we have not spent the current fiscal year budget so that we can roll that over to E&D, gives anyone who's in charge of finances agita, and gives me pause to really say, you know, we've got to try to break that cycle of reliance on that somehow, which is why you've heard us talk about, you know, monies that, the unknowns that may become the knowns. We need to take that money and not be quick to just go ahead and get new staff, because then we talk about the sustainability, but we have to start getting off the reliance of E&D and school choice.
Okay, any others before we take the vote? And I believe the bottom line is $50,006,069. That's option 2 that the motion is on the table for. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion defeated. 5 opposed, 2. Four.
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with recommendation number 1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And we needed 5, and we did get 5 for the budget. So, option 1 is the one we're going with. And it is 50, the bottom line is $50,058,069. Okay? Go ahead.
So I'll send a letter to the 2 towns notifying them of the assessment amount. Does the committee wish me to include any extra language at this point in time, or leave it as the stock standard letter?
Aren't you supposed to read the assessments and fees?
Well, I can read the assessments, but, yeah,
Assessments in the minutes.
but that's the total. But I'll read the assessments if anyone wants to hear that. Okay, the assessments. The assessment for Charlton will be $13,568,337. And Dudley, the assessment, net assessment will be $8,851,840. And the grand total of assessments together, Dudley and Charlton, $22,420,177.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? When we took that vote, we were voting on which recommendation to go with
We were voting on.
and voting on the budget itself, correct?
We're going on the recommendation 1, and you have it in your packet.
Okay.
The numbers.
Okay,
And I read them from
yep,
what
perfect,
you.
thank you.
So it's option 1, okay, recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 was defeated. There were only 2 votes for it, 5 against.
Board certified behavior analyst,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes.
And can somebody explain what excess and deficiency is? Is that like a stabilization fund?
That's reserves, that's like a stabilization fund from the town.
And how does it go in and how does it go out?
Which one?
The same way as the town. Excess revenues flow in, underspent expense accounts flow in as well.
Right, thank you. Thank you for clarifying and asking.
Thank you. We were wondering once upon a time. Remember, Kathy, what that stood for, too? Okay. Consideration to appoint superintendent of schools. So this is how we'll do it first. We are going to hear all the information from our members that went on a site visit. Then Mary did a lot of calling for references. We're going to all listen to that. And then we'll have the discussion on the superintendent. All members will have the discussion. But first, we're going to listen to reports. And Chris, I think you went on the site visit too, so you can come up and if you want to contribute something, and we'll start with the site visits first. And whoever wants to start first, because there were members that did attend, we can hear from all of the ones that attended. Who wants to start first? Chris?
Sure. I was able to attend 3 site visits. Dr. Julia Carlson, Steve Lamache, and Miss Haggerty in Irving. All of the visits provided some really great insight into the candidates' interactions with members of the school communities and district-level administration, as well as community members. Received a lot of strong feedback from all the constituencies for each candidate. Without going into specifics, I'd defer to Ms. Rabbit, but I'd be able to take any questions or direct information out to the floor if it's asked of me.
Anybody want to ask Mr. Stachewski any question? Okay. Chris, you can stay if you
I'll
want.
sit back and
Who else wants to, Jamie or?
Sure. I went on 2 of the site visits. I was able to meet with the school district for Dr. Whaley and Ms. Haggerty. I was impressed with both. I thought that the people that came forward for Dr. Whaley provided, there was probably 40 people I think we met with throughout the day, and there was a very varying group of people and types of people that he's worked with, parents, administrators, colleagues, and I felt like they gave us a very round picture of him. I thought that there was a lot of people that had a lot of good things to say. He's done a great deal for that high school. I think that the things that stuck out to me most were that he was able to he and his team, but he was this principal that led the way, were able to lead the graduation rates bring the graduation rates from 73% into the 92nd percentile. And that was, we heard over and over again, by his ability to directly approach each child that was struggling, whether they were going to graduate or not, and make a plan for that child. So I think that spoke volumes. He was also one of the first principals to stay, and they had a lot of turnover, and he stayed, and that built their cohesion and their team. So I thought that there was a lot to say about that. I was impressed with the site visit. Ms. Haggerty had, I want to say we met with 5 or 6 people, and again, from very varying walks of her world. I thought she came across as a wonderful person, and the things that she has done in the school, in each of her schools, was evident, and it was very clear that those students knew her in the schools because she was there and present, and I was impressed with that as well.
Thank you. Elaine?
I was able to attend all 4 site visits. So I in my process, I think they all have strengths in similar areas, and I think they have unique skill sets and strategies in other areas. So I will speak about them generally. I have a lot that I can add if we were to talk about a specific topic. So if you were to ask about budget, you were to ask about, students, you were asking about programs, then I could give you more feedback. But in lieu of not going on and on and on, I'll just kind of give you a recap of that. I was with Mrs. Terry when we visited Dr. Whaley at Burrville. And one of the areas, and I do agree that Dr. Whaley excelled in, was his ability to go into what had been an extremely unstable environment. They had six superintendents in the course of 4 years. He was a stabilizing factor from the assistant level to the principalship. It was a very conflicted teaching staff. There was a lot of morale issues, they had felt very defeated, and he was able to turn that around. He has also been very creative and very innovative in relation to the high school programming. He has added a tremendous amount of programming regarding the career technical piece, so he's giving the high school students not only a bridge through college, but through vocational assessments. I think one of the things, and I could add a few more things, but one of the things that I was most impressed with was the unity of the administrative team in what he was able to do with that. They spoke, staff within the building and administrators in other buildings spoke specifically about the process of looking at students that were at risk and taking students that were at risk, identifying them early and working with them to address what needs they had in order to be able to graduate. And I know Mrs. Terry gave you the statistics on the improvement in graduation. What I found that was most impressive to me was that at a principal level, working with his colleagues at the middle level and the elementary level, they took those particular at-risk students and they started to have conversations of, this is where the student is, how did they get there? And then the middle school was able to say, these were the things that we saw. Elementary was able to say, but these are the things that we saw. So their pathway of connecting students that were struggling went through the process of elementary to high school, which helped them then identify things that they needed to change programmatically within their educational process to make results better for students. That was something that stuck out to me. That was, I think, a really good use of data analysis. Also through being on the first round of interviews, the application process, second round of interviews, he is definitely a person who is always challenging, always growing, and that was something that stuck out in both. The next interview process that I went to was Fall River. I'm right, Mr. Starshevsky, it's Fall River?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry, it was a very busy week that week. So I went to Fall River, and we met, I can't tell you how many people that we've met. I probably, in the course of 4 interviews, I might have met about 120 people. But one of the things that was discussed with Dr. Carlson and the people that we met with was the impact that she has had in her role as assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, coming into a situation and recognizing or identifying the lack of cohesion in their curriculum. She initiated and worked on aligning and developing curriculum maps. I believe, I'm not sure, I think Fall River has 14 schools, that every school was operating on their own. And one of the things that was an issue was that there's a lot of movement within Fall River because they were neighborhood schools, that if a child moved from one area to the other area, that they lost a lot in the transition because what was being delivered at that grade level in different buildings was a different world. So there was a lot that was done in relation to curriculum that attached to rigor and alignment. It was the only site visit that I went to that I saw a variation of programming in addressing areas of student need. There was a focus on looking at students that are in the middle, the students that are just kind of average. What do we do with those particular students? We did visit, and I mentioned this, or it was part of my questioning to her, was the work on going into the Tansy school and looking at the culture of project-based learning across grades. There was a lot of work that was done in the educator evaluation process, the use of walkthroughs. That has been a fluid process from how they have turned and morphed it into the helpful tool. what was a strong message from the people that we sat and met with was professional learning communities that occurred both in the Central High in Providence and what was being done in Fall River. And there were several teachers that communicated in the process that this was a major change for Fall River. The quality and the enhancement of professional development, which was professional development that was tied to the strategic plan improvement plans that allowed teachers to pick professional development needs and was differentiated to what they needed to target. That was, I can go back to my notes for more things, but the professional learning communities is changing dramatically the impact for students regarding education. She also has a gifted and talented program. And we visited her, a program for at-risk students, which are students that typically, most of them are coming from the juvenile justice system, very challenging students to work with. And I know when we were walking across the street, she said, just want to let you know that if something's happening in the building, I'm just going to move you into a classroom. What impressed me at that was two. One was the principal that we met, that she said this would typically not be a person that would have this job because they lacked this information, but they have this, and I'm able to mentor that piece. And we met with two teachers that were so enthused to talk about their programming, what they were doing, how they were differentiating instruction, and that program is dramatically changing students. That was very impressive for me. I'll stop with Dr. Carlson for the moment and go to Superintendent Haggerty. So Superintendent Haggerty, there was very good feedback from her group. And if you understand Union 21, it's a very small community. Out of any of the site visits we went to, it was the fewest amount of people that we met with. But the people that we did talk to, two of our people we discussed things with over the phone, were very good at communicating that she sees the bigger picture. So her ability to look to the future of education in Massachusetts, how we were moving towards that, their emphasis in Irving has been towards universal design. It's a K-8 element. Their students can go off to 3 different high schools. But out of the 4 people that we've seen, she has the most complex job to work with because she has 4 separate districts, 4 separate elementary districts that cohesively have to create one big picture. So as far as her coming in and being able to take those 4 separate districts, align their individual cultures and vision into one overarching vision, she was spoken of very highly regarding that. She also has 4 town boards to work with, so even though her budget is much smaller than ours, it is much more complex than ours. She also was very thought of very highly by her administrative team, and she did go into the elementary school with us. One of the things that struck me with all of the people that we talked to was how much of a good listener she was. She seemed to be very thoughtful and contemplative about her process. There was a lot of emphasis on her being very approachable, being very available, and one of the things that I wanted to come down to was said, which is that there's the team approach bleeds through everything that they do. She's very collaborative, and her interest in direction is always what is in the best interest of students and serving students first. Okay. And then our last visit was with Superintendent LaMarche down in Bourne. Out of the superintendents the two superintendents would be Superintendent Haggerty, Superintendent LaMarche, that were actually in charge of a district. He definitely was very impressive regarding the budget process. He's very passionate. He is on his administrative team level. He's very engaging, very intense. It was a word that was used more than once, but very challenging people for growth and looking forward. He made some changes which were a heavy emphasis of discussion, which was the realignment, because their buildings were geographically based with neighborhoods. The district is split by a canal, and he worked through the process of realigning the district so it became more building-based. So kids will now have to cross the bridge, instead of, you having your little neighborhood thing and being together, now you're going to have, similar to how we do, a lower elementary and upper elementary, a middle, and the high school process. The students that we met with were very well spoken, and spoke to their experiences at the high school, and how well they were prepared. I'm waiting for the thought to circle back down. In our tour with Superintendent LaMarche, he took us to the new school that they're building. So in relation to realigning the district, there was also a need to reroute buses. And that was, again, something that we know from bus conversations here, that becomes a very passionate issue for parents that are used to certain things. So he made an effort to be out in the community, meeting people, to talk to them, to really explain the rationale behind those changes. And the process of the touring of the new Peebles Elementary School, I really didn't want to go, because I really don't want to look at new schools because I want a new school. But educationally, the excitement that's down there regarding what that building is going to do for students, how it really is, the future of education, was very exciting. Every site visit that we went to, all of the people that we met were very passionate, very complimentary, very confident that they were making a recommendation that the person that they were supporting would be a good candidate for us as a superintendent. None of them wanted to lose the person that they were supporting. It's difficult in the level of looking at site visits, because the site visits are not equal to measure. Rhode Island doesn't do site visits. This was a completely, unusual experience for Dr. Whaley to have people come in and for him to go out on a site visit. I took that into account because it was not something that he was practiced or experienced in doing. So we met with a lot of people, we toured with people, we had time to sit down and talk with him, but we didn't get to see education in action. One thing that we did hear quite clearly was that people, when he was presented with a problem, he was thorough, he researched it, but he acted. He didn't leave things hanging. Going to visit Fall River, we got to see education in action, and that's really important for me, because what we do is based on students. And the impact of the impact of what was being done for teachers with the direct impact to students was communicated quite clearly. And I know that that was part of my questioning with the interview. With Irving, it was a little difficult to measure some experiences because the central administration staff only consists of 3 people. There's a business manager, there's a special education manager, and there's a superintendent, and that is it. So looking at the concept of all of the different structures that we have, it's very difficult to evaluate Superintendent Haggerty in relation to that. But she is visible. One of the concerns, and I believe Mrs. Terry might have asked this question, is that you're in your buildings and you have an ability to be in your buildings because your district is very small. Our district is not. Your ability, based on the scope of the job and how much bigger it's going to be for you, how does that work? But, they were very complimentary. We did walk into many classrooms. We did look at the design of how they were educating in their classrooms, and it was exciting to look at. As far as Superintendent Lamache, I learned a lot about him as an administrator, as a manager. But the one thing that's missing for me that I can't evaluate him on is that I didn't see any education. We didn't tour a building that was in use, other than going into the innovation lab after school. I didn't see what's happening on a regular basis in those buildings. So where I'm able to measure him is as an administrator on the technical aspects of it, but I didn't see the impact on the education piece. So that's what I know, and I can answer questions regarding people because I have lots of notes.
Any questions? No? Thank you, Elaine.
Welcome.
Mary?
Okay. So I made a lot of reference check calls, and people were very frank, which was good. And I did get a mixture of feedback, and I'll try not to reiterate anything that's already been said. So I'll just kind of skip through my notes, but I'll start with Dr. Whaley. I got feedback that he's good at bringing a team with diverse views together and gets everyone on board, is involved out there with everyone, good communicator, inclusive, puts everything out on the table, brings all the right parties together and so forth, and is a big believer in distributed leadership and involving all the stakeholders. He appreciates talking to people in person and has gotten better at taking a step back and not having a knee-jerk reaction, works on getting feedback and advice and finding out more and thinking things through first. Sometimes he struggles with saying no first, and then he comes back a couple days later and wants to talk about it. When dealing with rigid or inflexible personalities, it could become an authoritative situation, but he does try to talk things out whenever possible. Some references, on the other hand, said that he is very tactful and consistent in his manners. Just to let you know, I did speak to principals, I spoke to school psychologists, I spoke to school committee chair people, so it was very much a mix of people, including technology directors. So, let's see. He has a good way of presenting different sides of the story to come up with the best solutions for kids. Thinks of many vantage points. I got that feedback quite a bit. Good sense of humor, supportive and approachable, and very thorough. He has a good way of walking people through the rationale of his decision-making process, and he has a strong presence, cool, calm, and collected. He's visionary. He's definitely an initiator as well as an implementer of projects and proposals. He sees the big picture and what is coming down the line that needs to be addressed and puts the right people together to implement it. He's a good leader, able to delegate and lead teams. They spoke about the increase in an improvement in graduation rates. He's implemented more student-centered learning, and encourages teachers to utilize technology in teaching. His professional development might include building political acumen, getting him out there and involved in the community because the opportunity simply hasn't been there. He would benefit from a mentor to bounce ideas off of and to work with MASS, and he would need to get up to speed on laws in a different state. Okay, so that was Dr. Whaley. Superintendent Haggerty. incredibly organized, motivated, inspirational, and a great leader, visionary, upbeat, with a good sense of humor, energetic, and involved. Quick learner, always striving to learn more. Very involved in the school and events that are going on, and very visible. The kids love her. The door is always open. She's supportive and friendly, encourages ideas, and she's built a cohesive team. She has a good relationship with principals and staff, and that relationship building is a good strength of hers. She's able to address personality issues effectively when they arise, and has had to deal with issues with outspoken, direct reports speaking out to others instead of going directly to her. But she doesn't get drawn in by difficult people. She remains professional. She has a good way of defining boundaries and communicating things people don't necessarily want to say in a very productive way, and has difficult conversations very easily. Tactful, calm, steady presence, good negotiator. She is sensitive to demands on teachers and support staff, and parents also feel welcome with her. Cognizant of what is going on, but gives people plenty of autonomy. She's responsible for 4 separate school committees, 4 separate budgets, and 4 town budget meetings. God bless her. She's very communicative with the school committee chair. There's never any surprises, and gets to the point, not a lot of unnecessary verbiage. Let's see, she started a roundtable with other superintendents to share information and ideas, and she's very fiscally responsible, very knowledgeable about mandates, SPED, and general ed law and school budgets. When she doesn't know something, she finds the people who do. Familiar with all aspects of education. She's an initiator of efforts, brought on Universal Design for Learning to Union 28. Passion behind initiatives come from her. She has great suggestions, constructive ideas, and good follow-through. Okay. She did the alignment of curriculum vertically in the district. She is on the ground floor supporting and implementing initiatives. She smoothed out significant personnel issues and moved people into jobs they were better suited for. Let's see, always extremely polite and professional. Possible professional growth area would include working more effectively with personalities that she doesn't necessarily jive with, but she can definitely achieve this. Quite talented, has far more capabilities than can be utilized in Union 28. Her ideas and potentials are bigger than Union 28, needs to be where she can grow and stretch to her potential. She's an asset to the district, very student-focused, and will leave behind huge shoes to fill. They don't want her to leave. Okay. Dr. Carlson. The big word that kept coming out was inspirational. She came into a chaotic situation and brought stabilization and direction. Great communicator and listener, and provides explanations for her views. She holds people accountable, is able to have those difficult conversations in a productive and professional way, and she always treats people with respect. Principals feel that they have an ally in her, supports them as leaders of the school, and they in turn support their teachers. She does a lot of reading and research to understand all the facets and impacts, has tremendous courage, and handles issues head-on, but always in a professional way. Great at quickly being able to assess people's strengths and best utilize those. Identifies areas for improvement and makes recommendations and formulates a plan, then works on that plan. Very student-centered, always has the students' best interests at heart, has powerful convictions, and is a strong advocate. She understands politics. She's a quick study, visionary, and patient with others. Very high energy level, works hard, and just goes and goes. She was described as the Energizer Bunny. She is definitely an initiator or creator of projects and proposals, and she tackled the beast of K through 12 curriculum, updating maps, including administration and teachers in the process. Mrs. Rabbit already talked about the learning walkthroughs. Increase in graduation rates were because of her, and she builds a positive school climate and culture with school pride. She's fun to work with and very caring about the whole person. She is not a micromanager, allows people to do their jobs and build leaders. She is so passionate about her beliefs that sometimes might have an issue with people she thinks are not supporting the kids. Eagerly accepts her responsibilities and get programs and systems implemented immediately. Professional growth might include continuing to build her skills in administration and leadership and continue to listen to dissenting opinions and incorporate other people's good ideas. She's extremely passionate about education, real sense of social justice, good at resolving issues and not having to make them public. Very honest and upfront, good speaker, often presents at the school committee meetings and able to handle tough questions well. Limited exposure to legislators or town administration. Superintendent assumes this role. Able to manage diverse individuals and groups well, such as the joint labor union, and never complains, but rather appreciates the challenge. Makes data-driven decisions, familiar with the grant process, and successful in obtaining grants. Includes appropriate parties in brainstorming and decision-making. Not a lot of experience with the school budget, would need a really great business manager to teach her everything about the budget. Conversely, she can move things along on a shoestring. Where she does not have experience, she knows enough to get the information, talks to experts, and become educated to tackle what she doesn't know. They felt that she has what it takes to be a superintendent. She has extensive SPED background, always growing and trying to have a great impact on education. Great work ethic, very capable, and extremely bright. And finally, Superintendent LaMarche. He leads by example and definitely in the thick of things with you. He's very hands-on and doesn't ask people to do things he wouldn't do himself. More than one person described him standing out there with the signs in the rain for the 2.5 override that they had, which they obtained on their first try. He's clear and concise and extremely organized, an energetic action taker, very proactive. He's passionate about getting it right for the kids. He definitely has an open door policy for everyone and is a great sounding board for his staff. Good listener, fair, consistent, honest. Trusts people to do their jobs and is always there to support them. He knows what he's looking for and communicates that, but is always open to feedback and loves questions. Has high expectations and works with people in a way that they want to work harder and solve problems. Builds strong relationships with principals, administrators, town leadership, legislators, police and fire departments, and community members. He's respected by all. He was described as the mayor. He builds and empowers leadership in the administrative team, and it has become a close-knit team. He transformed very diverse teams and administrative styles into a cohesive and well-functioning district and unified team. The administration feels supported. He allows people to try things, and he promotes a culture in which every principal at every grade level believes that they are responsible for graduating students that are ready for college and career. He regularly invites legislators and school committee to district celebrations and other events. Students even know the school committee members by face or name. He pulls people into discussions and the decision-making process, school personnel, parents, town leadership, and students, very directive, develops a plan, then sticks with it to implement. He is definitely both an initiator and implementer of projects and proposals, and he's visionary. He's always seeking to learn and grow, thinks globally, and promotes innovation. Extremely intelligent, always 5 steps ahead of everyone, reading, learning, thinking of ways to make things better. He plans 10 years ahead. Needs to recognize when people have not caught up with him and his thought process yet, to slow down, talk slower, be patient in helping people to understand and educate them and bring them up to speed in a caring way. Relating to others who are not as well versed in the topic he is passionate about is important. When in situations with difficult people, he tries to include them in the resolution process, and when necessary, he steps back and brings other people in that would be better suited to resolve the problem. Professional growth could include an ability to connect with teachers more smoothly so that it comes across as genuinely as he really is. Communication is always very honest. Sometimes he communicates in a delayed fashion and could be a little bit more timely. Very cerebral, sometimes prefers to work on efforts on his own. Transparent in the budgeting process, physically responsible to the taxpayer while making sure that the schools get what they need. Very strong with budgets. He was described as brilliant. Worked to get the district successfully through a huge budget issue. Operates from a place of consistency and truthfulness, tactful and professional, always makes sure he's aware of his audience. The growth in the district is because of him. He developed curriculum, a dual enrollment program, innovation studio, and cohesiveness. Skilled in many areas, including technology, administration, special ed, teaching, budgets, leadership, has MSBA experience, great leader, manager, and educator. He has made the school become the center of the community in everyone's eyes. Kids are always on the forefront of his decisions, and the overall consensus was, could not say enough good things about him. They don't want him to leave. He moves things toward improvement and innovation, and they wanted to lie to me and tell me bad things about him so he wouldn't leave.
Thank you, Mary.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you for the site visitors. A lot of information
It
was,
is.
that you did gather, both of you. So now we can start the discussions before we do the voting of appointing. Who wants to start? Okay,
Where to
Kathy.
begin?
Those are very informative information you gave us, and I also liked the forms that Mrs. Sullivan sent us about the people that the people met with on-site. And a lot of those concerns are comments pro and con, some of the exact same things I had thought of as I was looking at the 4 candidates. And I think overall, do we want to name our candidate? We would, yeah. Mine would be Stephen LaMarche for several reasons. First of all, he's a sitting superintendent who's been in his job for a long time. He knows the legislators of Massachusetts. He lives in Massachusetts. He wants to come to this district, which I think is a big plus. I know we never really asked who would move here, but I think some have said they would not move. And I think it's important to be part of the district, even though we cannot legally, at one time they tried to make that legal, that you had to live in your district. That's illegal. I think it's important to be in the district and living here, being a taxpayer, being visible 24/7 as opposed to someone who has to commute back and forth. A big plus, I think, is he's done capital projects, and we know what we need in this district. We're going through that study, and he has done the building. As Mrs. Rabbit said, they've got a beautiful building down there that he's involved with. He's also, you've said that, and I think I got that impression from him. He's done a lot of budgets, and I think our main concerns are budget and capital improvements at this point in time. And I think from what I've heard and from what I've read from all the different reports we've gotten, I think that he would be the one that would have a plus in every one of those parts. Some are good in one, but they don't have the overall that Mr. LaMarche would have, so he would be my choice.
Thank you.
I wrote it down because there's a lot. I first would like to say this was a very difficult decision because there was no clear-cut candidate that checked off every box for me. That being said, the 2 candidates that it came down to for me were Dr. Carlson and Mr. LaMarche. I know that Mr. LaMarche comes with a superintendent experience, but with some of his answers about keeping things the same, I don't see that meeting our students' needs or our district's future. The needs of how the students are being taught are changing every year, and we need to keep up and offer new ways of teaching the students in our district. While Dr. Carlson does not come with the superintendent experience, she does come with the experience, excuse me, she does come with the experience that teaching and learning of students is constantly changing. When we look back at the success of our past superintendents, they have not come with budget experience or superintendent experience, but with the want to make a difference in our district. Mr. Desto, being our last superintendent, was able to positively change a lot in our district with no previous experience. We need to keep moving forward as a district, and I see Dr. Carlson as being the candidate for us.
Sorry, I actually had the opportunity to sit down and have lunch with each of the candidates. The only one I didn't get to see was Mr. LaMarche. I had a test that day. So when you read all of the reviews and stuff that they had to say about Dr. LaMarche, I was so sad that I didn't get to meet him and everything. But Dr. Carlson reminded me exactly of the person, not of the person, but of Mr. Desto. And she had the same exact attitude coming in. And she started off with, she treated us, there were 3 of us sitting at the lunch, the high school students, and she treated us like adults, but she reminded us of the kid that we should be and what we should enjoy. And she was out there saying how goofy she was and how, you know, high heels and makeup wasn't always what she wanted to be in, and that she would rather be out having experiences with the students out and about and in the school district than just sitting, hiding away in her office all day. And she said that one of the biggest things she wants to do is she wants to have her face seen all over the district. And it was great to meet her and everything. And I told Mrs. Desto that she was like the girl version of Mr. Desto. She was just fantastic, and the 3 of us were raving about her for the next 3 days. And every time a new candidate came in, we kind of felt bad, and we were just listening and nodding. And we came back after, and we're like, Dr. Carlson, she's just too good, and she was just amazing. But yeah, I agree with Miss Reed.
Thank you,
She was amazing.
Kaylee. Thank you. Who else?
I'll go. I had a very difficult time as well. There was 2 candidates that rose to the top for me, and it was Dr. Carlson as well as Mr. LaMarche. And so I just kind of put a bulleted list together for myself of the things that I was looking for. And at the top of my list was extensive and deep experience and knowledge of budgeting. That's really critical to us in this district and where we are and where we're headed. Experience with successfully moving the district forward with limited funding. You really need somebody with experience to do that. A demonstrated and respected leader was on my list, excellent communicator, someone who's very transparent, places importance on honesty and transparency, proficient, an organized manager, approachable, supportive, ability to make tough decisions, but in a very respectful way, demonstrated experience and success in empowering and building strong leadership, because I think everybody wants to grow in this district. Student-focused, passionate, and energetic, demonstrated success in building strong working relationships with everyone, bringing out the best in everyone. It's a diverse administrative team, school styles are different, and putting it all together to build even more unified, cohesive teams. I think knowledge in the various areas of education are really important, and action-oriented person, both an initiator and an implementer of projects, and somebody that has experience and knows how to do that. Someone who's truly visionary, proven success in building strong relationships between school, town leadership, legislators, other community members, and demonstrated success in advocacy for a district. And because of those points, when I really took a step back, the only one that rose to the top for me was Mr. LaMarche.
Thank you. And I'll go next after Mary. Okay. The good news about this search is that we have some very solid candidates. In fact, I'm torn between 2 candidates in particular, either of whom I believe that would make fine superintendent. But because the time vote is now at hand, I have to choose, and I do choose Mr. LaMarche. He is an experienced superintendent and could thus hit the ground running. He comes out of special ed background, and that experience is a value added component, as it is on several other applicants, to be sure. He is willing to relocate, which is a sign of his commitment to this position. His record of accomplishments in his current position suggests that he always does more than what is expected. He goes that extra mile. As his letters of recommendation and other information from his file strongly conveys, he is a person of unquestioned integrity and high intelligence. From his interview, I could tell that he is able to conquer difficult situations with calm, clarity, and common sense. The solutions he offers are logical and practical. Indeed, his answer to one of the questions, and it was Mary's, should the school district be run chiefly as a business, was particularly sensible and convincing. He is likely to prove highly proficient at finding the happy medium between applying the job a business sense on the one hand and a broader education-focused sense on the other. In conclusion, Steve indeed will be the best fit for the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. Okay, who else would like to go?
Decision time.
Okay, I'll go first if you're not ready. I'll be honest,
Okay.
I was coming here tonight intending to tell you that Julia Carlson was my choice. I was also conflicted, as many of you were, that I thought all four of them were amazing candidates, and I really want to credit the committee that put these four candidates before us, because you've given us a very difficult task tonight, which is wonderful for our district. But I was coming here tonight to tell you that I thought Julia Carlson had many of the most qualities that I thought would put forth the best efforts for our district. And listening to Mary's point of view and the data that she was able to provide to us, which was very thorough, so thank you for all of that, tells me that Stephen LaMarche really just rounds out all of the different things that our district needs. The budgeting experience, the ability to build relationships, the avenues that he has already created with legislators and town officials, the way that he can bring projects forth. And I agree with you, Mrs. Kabala, about the fact that our capital budget improvement needs are really where we're going to focus all of our efforts. We're going to have to. Over the next 5-10 years. And so you've given me pause and made me reconsider, and I think that I'm telling you tonight, I think Stephen LaMarche will be the best candidate, in my opinion.
Okay, can I go? So I would agree with what everyone's saying, that I was definitely down to Stephen LaMarche and Dr. Carlson, and being from the first interview with Stephen LaMarche and Dr. Carlson, we left there wowed. Stephen LaMarche wowed me in his first interview. He brought a binder and took us through it. He looked at data, gave us some suggestions on things right from the get-go, and it really impressed me as well as the committee. Dr. Carlson, also did the same. And I guess that's where I was in angst about the whole decision. But as I look, I look at my position and realize that I'm not making the decision for me, I'm making the decision for my constituents as well. And I've talked to a lot of different teachers, different constituencies that are out there. And I've had people watch the interviews, and everyone's coming back to, we need that proven leader. We need someone with the budgeting experience, and we need someone that can just go and start right off on the right path. While I believe Dr. Carlson would be a wonderful benefit to us, I think at this time, we need Mr. LaMarche. And that's who I believe I would vote for.
I really wanted to call in sick today.
I know.
Really wanted to call in sick. This could have been the night that had a big snowstorm. I am not conflicted, I am tortured by the decision. Because if I were to look at this by category and look at it by subject matter, I think you have to integrate the other two candidates into the conversation. Just from my perspective, in my viewpoint and site visits. So, interestingly enough, and I'm looking from the perspective of looking at people initially on paper, looking at people in a first round interview, looking at people on a site visit, and then looking at people on the final visit. And all four of those people have been like a ping pong ball. So people that my first impression on paper were the strongest candidates have moved in the process. People that were weaker have moved through the process. And people that interviewed here versus there are different. I agree with Mrs. Kamignani that Superintendent LaMarche had a strong interview in the first round. I was very disappointed in his second interview, his final interview. I don't think that he demonstrated to me that he was a leader of that level of experience. If I'm looking at the budget process, I think Superintendent Haggerty is the strongest candidate for budget because she has to manage multiple budgets with fiscally strapped towns, with a category of region that is probably like the forgotten stepchild for education in Massachusetts. She legislatively has been very active with the Rural Caucus, looking at trying to advocate for Chapter 70 funding. So those are two areas where I think Superintendent Haggerty is a strong candidate. When I look at the management and the administrative process and systems and procedures, I agree that I think Superintendent LaMarche is very strong in those areas. I think that he has, an ability, and you can see his mind moving when you're talking with him, when you're interviewing with him. It's a tickler file of moving through the process. He's a very organized thinker. And I think that I agree that he has a commitment to wanting to move here. I think the impression that I had in the first round interview that was concerning to me was that the move here was based on first trying to be closer to family. So that was the first thing that he said, is the move, I want to be here to move closer to family needs. The impression of Dudley-Charlton was a convenient means to get to that process. Not to say that he doesn't have an awareness and a desire to do a good job. With Dr. Whaley, I will be honest with you that he's definitely one of those people that his trajectory through the process was one that wasn't, he wasn't starting out on the shining list of the 8 people we interviewed, but at the end of the interview process and on paper, there were things that came through to him that were very strong. One of the things that I was very impressed with in his personal statement, because all of the candidates had to do a personal statement on their application process, was his desire to address an issue at the high school that was regarding scheduling changes. And to the piece of talking about collaboration and looking at stakeholders, he actually took that stakeholder pool of students, administrators, and teachers, and they created three pilots. There were surveys before, the pilots were implemented, there were surveys after, and after those 3 experiences, they turned around and collaboratively made a decision what was the correct process to move forward with. There were other experiences like that where I felt his leadership and his his collaboration, ability to hear multiple perspectives and move forward were demonstrated to me. I found that very appealing. He was, initially probably one of the unlikely candidates because he has no experience in it. He has no experience as a superintendent, and he does have central office experience in relation to curriculum. But the absolute turnaround that he did in that district is pretty impressive. In relation to Dr. Carlson, this is an issue that I struggle with, and one of the reasons why, and I'm looking perspective to perspective. So I will agree that Superintendent LaMarche and Dr. Carlson moved to the top, but I'm looking at completely different packages of who they present. And I've rewatched the interview with the full committee multiple times. And this is the thing that struck me, and this was the last thing that I did this afternoon, was to rewatch these interviews again. And I look at what I consider an innate quality and something that can be learned. And where is the difference with those things? Here's the thing that struck me in watching the interviews side by side, is that Superintendent LaMarche did an excellent job of moving through everything in a very technical, mechanical way. But for me, he didn't give and provide examples to a lot of what he talked about. The first question for me was very telling, and the first question was mine, and it was a very extensive question regarding educator evaluation. And Superintendent LaMarche did something that another candidate did with the interim process, which was to give me the mechanics and the history of why it came about. When that question got asked to Dr. Carlson, the first thing that she went to was the perspective of a teacher, and what she was looking for as a teacher and how she used that process to enhance the teacher experience. On that element alone, when I'm looking at education, I have, in my own personal experience, having, a child that had differentiating needs, I have had lots of specialists in my life working with him. And there were people that came into my home that were gifted, that had the innate sixth sense of what to do, and there were people that came in that were mechanical. And my son grew most under people that had that innate quality. Everything about Dr. Carlson in the process of interviewing and what she has done was innovative, creative, and looking at making something out of nothing. So for me, when I describe the district to people and our fiscal situation, which I'll be very honest with you, our fiscal situation is never going to change dramatically unless legislatively something happens with MLC. So the management of the money piece, I think Superintendent LaMarche and Dr. Carlson are both people that have demonstrated that they can make something with nothing. But Dr. Carlson was the person for me that demonstrated the initiative and the innovation regarding programming and what programming can do. And having several teachers being part of the search committee, listening to their questions and hearing their concerns with it, I have a connection to what she has done with professional learning communities, what she's done with the walkthrough process, and how she's learned at enhancing and changing the educators and the teachers within the district, the impact that it's having on students. Our greatest resource in this district, bottom line, is our teachers. And I think that an ability to change and look at, for me, a bottom-up theory of the impact to teachers and what we do there and bringing it up and filtering it through students, I think has the greatest impact on students. And this, for me, is the area that I have struggled with in my tenure on the committee, is that I've not been in a position where I feel that we have made any dramatic impact on all students. We have areas of strength and we have pockets, but we have not impacted all students. And we have a great need to be able to do that. This is where I struggle, because I would like to take both of those people and make a conjoined twin and have them operate together. It's not possible. Superintendent LaMarche is very much on the pathway of what we have known and what we would be comfortable with, and I think he can come in with those strengths and roll. But I look to Dr. Carlson as the comment that I heard frequently and came through on surveys, which is that we need fresh eyes to look at how we do what we do. And the innovation, the creativity, targeting pools of students, I don't know. I'm just, honestly, I didn't want to be in a position to do this tonight. I really feel like I could bring them both back in and ask 20 more questions to be able to put them more on an equal playing field. But the mechanics of the superintendent job, through the mentoring process, through the new superintendent initiation process, the mechanics of it can be done. We have a strong business manager. We're moving through. Mr. Matthew can't create more money. That's not going to change. You know, what we need to do is learn to do better with what we have. And on multiple occasions, the analysis that Dr. Carlson was able to present and what I heard from the people that I met with showed that she had the ability to analyze those areas of weakness and find solutions to those programmatically and innovation. So Mrs. Reed and I are going to be in the same position we were in 2014, and I would put forth Dr. Carlson.
Thank you. So I'm going to
I'll make
entertain
a
a
motion
motion.
that we hire Superintendent Stephen LaMarche for Superintendent of the Dudley-Charlton School District, effective July 1st, 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, 5-2. And so we have a new superintendent, Mr. Stephen LaMarche. And I'm going to entertain another motion to make it unanimous. I mean, we can see if it passes. Do we have a motion to make it unanimous? A unanimous appointment? No one?
I would support a motion to make it unanimous.
Okay. And do I have a second? No.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second, and it's a discussion, and usually they do that, but you don't have to vote. It's your privilege whether you want to make it unanimous or not. So, any more discussion on that? All in favor?
May I ask?
What?
I don't feel like I should vote, like, voting affirmative, like, is it a majority vote to make it a unanimous decision? Would that make that a unanimous?
Well, if the two don't want it, it'll still be 5-2.
Okay, I just didn't want to
Okay?
force them
No,
to
we're
do
not
something.
forcing them to
Okay.
do it. It'll
Okay.
still be 5 to
Got
do, to see if they do want to do it, that's
Okay.
all. So, all in favor? Okay? Opposed?
Could I put a comment into the record,
Go ahead.
please?
Opposed? Stephanie?
Similar to the position that I was in 2014 when the vote was 5-2. I need my vote to record because I feel that that was the strongest choice for me, having to make this decision. But what I will say is what I said to Mr. Desto when he was advanced to superintendent, is that I will be a very strong supporter. I will be here to advocate with you. My interest is always what's in the best interest of the district. But I need to record my opinion and what my vote was and leave it in the record as such.
And the same with Stephanie wants to leave it in the record.
Well, to leave on the record would mean, you know, like I said before, both candidates were the only two that, out of the four, that I would ever consider. But that being said, they both have their faults, they both have their highs and their lows. And what I thought, based on my vote, was Dr. Carlson. And that's just my vote. That's how I'm gonna leave.
Can I withdraw my motion? I don't think it's gonna.
We've already
Right,
voted.
okay, all right, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
I think we did that for Mr. Desto too, I think. And so we have a new superintendent, and we're going with the next meeting dates now. And then we'll make the call. I'll make the call. And I will have to get the telephone
The
number.
chair will make
Probably
the
already
call.
told them over there.
Okay.
Yes, she's going to.
I can step down and Mary can
Okay.
finish it up for me.
She's going
What's
to
up?
step over to you.
What's that?
Okay. Mary, just read the next meeting dates, the subcommittee, future agenda items.
That way
you can.
And then we'll be going into executive session.
Okay.
Okay?
That way you can come back and
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay,
Right.
so, next meeting dates, school committee meetings, Wednesday, March 13th, 2019, at Shepherd Hill Regional High School at 6:30 PM. Wednesday, March 27th, 2019, Charlton Middle School, 7 PM. Budget and Finance Subcommittee, still TBA?
No, we have
It's
to.
March 12th, 8:30 to 10:30, and March 26th, 8:30 to 10:30.
12 and 26?
Yes, 12 and 26.
Okay. Okay, yes.
We're 6:30?
Yes, because the auditors are coming in. Remember?
Okay,
The
auditors
auditors.
coming in?
Okay. We talked about that.
Policy Review Subcommittee, Wednesday, March 6, 2019, Charlton Middle School. Future agenda items, Policy Review Subcommittee, FY20 Budget, Shepherd Hill Program of Studies. Anything else?
I think, don't we want to do school choice sooner or later?
We're going to do school choice.
School choice.
We'll be
We
ready for
also
that.
have the auditor's report
Yeah.
on the 13th, and that meeting will be starting at 6:30.
Okay.
The capital.
Yeah.
I'll see if they're available.
See, and Dr. Nash, we have some other things too.
Dr. Nash.
We also have the discussion of whatever data you bring forward regarding the vaping alarm system.
Yes, if we get that by then. If I have,
Dr. Nash, I won't be here on the 13th.
okay.
Okay, so vaping?
The vaping alarm.
Yes, if we're able to come back with cost or something, find out what that is.
There's a lot of schools.
Okay. So I have Policy Review Subcommittee, FY20 Budget, Shepherd Hill Program of Studies, School Choice, Auditor's Report, Vaping Alarm. What am I missing?
Et cetera.
Et cetera, et
There are
cetera.
some others, I know that, I'm trying to remember, the Mars is the 27th, their report, and I know there's at least, there's a couple of others,
Okay.
but, yeah,
Okay.
we'll add it.
Budget, throw that in there, right? Oh, you got budget.
Yeah,
Okay, we have budget.
yeah.
Anything else? Okay.
No.
Okay.
At least I can get rid of
We'll now be entering into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Do I have
That's
a,
correct, there should be union personnel, it's a typo, because
Oh.
it should be union personnel.
that makes more sense.
That's a big difference,
Right,
yeah.
that's a big
We're
difference.
not negotiating
Okay.
with a big shot.
You need to take a roll call vote.
Yeah,
Okay. I'll take a roll call.
Yes.
yes, thank you.
Roll call. Elaine?
Yes.
Again, and if I said no.
You have to go home.
Okay.
Stephanie, I should